We have a range of topics to ask questions on today, but let me start with one of the most pressing ones recently because of the shutdown. Parks Director Jonathan Jarvis took a lot of heat over the closures of Washington monuments like World War II. Was there any political motivation behind the barriers that were erected around the national parks?
In 2 words, absolutely not. You know, I've learned a lot of things over the course of 6 months, but particularly over the course of the last few weeks. One is the Anti-Deficiency Act of 1870 and the criminal penalties that it causes if you put people on staff that do anything other than protecting life and property. So the people of the National Park Service did not want to barricade the monuments, but the monuments don't take care of themselves. So we had park police to protect, but normally there'd be about 300 people on staff that are walking the mall, taking care of visitors, picking up garbage, cleaning the restrooms, maintaining the grounds, interpreting what's there, and they were not allowed to come to work. So the barricades were there to protect the resources, and we worked as best as we could. And I know the honor flights from the World War II thanked us for making every accommodation we could within the letter of the law to help the veterans see the monuments that they wanted to see, but do it in a way that also fulfilled our obligation under the Anti-Deficiency Act and the decision to close the parks. So absolutely no political motivation.
So, since we're talking about the shutdown, do you have any more of a refined estimate of what the government closure costs local economies near the country's major national parks? And following up on that, the questions come from several members of Congress that the Interior Department repaid the states for running the parks during the shutdown in 95, 96. Why can't you do that now?
That's what I call a multiple probe, 2 questions at once. So the first question, we know that national parks generate about $76 million a day in economic activity. Every day is not equal. Every park's not generating as much activity at the same time, so we're still tallying the numbers to try and understand that. I do know that for concessionaires, people were furloughed and they did not get paid. People were let go, food spoiled. There's a lot of loss associated with that can't just be made up with what they would normally make in economic activity. So still working on those numbers. We don't know them. What was the second one?
Sorry. Why didn't you repay the states?
Oh, okay, it's the states. So it's misinformation. The states in 1995 were not repaid for money they gave. In fact, what happened, and it was only one state, it was the state of Arizona, they agreed to pay, they sent a deposit in, the shutdown ended, and the deposit was sent back. So there actually wasn't any money kept by the federal government in 1995, and we had to do some digging back in the historical records to understand that, but our records are going to be much more helpful should this crazy thing ever happen again. Hopefully memories are longer than they were last time and we won't have to go through it. But there was never any federal money repaid to the states last go-around or this go-around.
A little bit of breaking news today. Senate Republicans today blocked 2 Obama nominees, Mel Watt for the Housing Agency and Patricia Ann Millett for U.S. Court of Appeals. As somewhat of a newbie to Washington, what do you say about what does this say about how Washington works or doesn't work, and how does this impact you with so many unfilled positions at the Interior Department?
I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's very different than the private sector. Very, very different. It takes a little bit longer, has all kinds of complications. But I'm confident that we will round out a strong team at Interior led by Mike Connor. Mike, could you just give a wave, even though it's not your style? Mike is nominee to be Deputy Secretary of the Department of Interior. Fantastic, knowledgeable resource, brings a great depth of background. He's through the Senate committee. They have agreed to forward his nomination to the full Senate, and he's in that list that's waiting to get voted on by the full Senate, which we hope will be very soon. Or Rhea Sue, yesterday, nominated by the President to be the Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, currently serving as Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget. These are 2 terrific individuals. We hope we'll be through the process very quickly. Certainly there are other people that are serving in an acting capacity in the Department of the Interior, and I am treating them as though they're going to be there forever. We are not waiting for this long and laborious process to keep things moving because we've got important work to do. And the team that's there, whether they're acting or they are permanently in the positions, well, as permanent as these positions are, they are all working together to make sure we drive the agendas and the priorities forward.
Presidents usually take the opportunity to name some big national monuments. I think all presidents have done so. They don't need to go to Congress by using the Antiquities Act. The president could do that. What are some of the areas that may be under consideration for national monuments, and will the president use the Antiquities Act to name some?
Well, the president has used the Antiquities Act 9 times so far in his administration, and certainly if Congress doesn't step up to act to protect some of these important places that have been identified by communities and people throughout the country, then the president will take action. I think it's consistently true that every action that he has taken has resulted from a support that's come from the community, where the community has said, this is special, we want you to protect it. So that will continue to happen. There are places all over the country. As I mentioned in my remarks, I'll be going out to visit some of them. I'll be meeting with community members. I'll be understanding why these places are special before we go forward with any actions. But there's no question that if Congress doesn't act, we will act. We'll also say that there are dozens of bills in the House and or the Senate right now that have been identified by both Republicans and Democrats that are special areas that they want to set aside. So it would be great if they took action and they set those lands aside, just like happened in the Omnibus Public Lands Act of 2009. Both of those are mechanisms that we hope will be used to recognize these special places and to take care of them.
Just to follow up on that, would the president act to use the Antiquities Act in any case where the local community objected?
I said throughout my confirmation hearing that we would be working with the local communities. Now, does that mean everything has to have 100% support? I guess I haven't seen anything yet where everybody agrees on everything, but certainly where there's a groundswell of support, we will focus our energies. We won't be focusing on our energies where there's a tremendous amount of conflict.
You talked about climate change for a little bit. There are critics on all sides of climate change, of course. Some are saying Interior is punishing oil and gas industries in favor of renewables, and others saying you haven't done enough to push renewables. How do you see the fit?
Energy is important. It drives our economy. We're sitting under lights here. We've got cameras rolling, and those are all driven by electrons that have to be produced somewhere. The President made it clear that he had an all-of-the-above energy strategy, and that's something that I embrace and I understand. I'm also really proud of what the Department of Interior has done to stand up renewable energy programs around the country. We've announced several offshore wind lease sales, innovative way of doing master lease planning to work out conflicts and to put areas that have high wind potential and low conflict, like I was talking about with landscape level understanding and conservation. Worked on solar plans like the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. These are important utility scale plans that provide renewable energy to supplement the non-renewable energy sources we have, but both are being done, and across the landscape, Interior works with companies that are involved in both conventional and unconventional renewables or non-renewables and renewables, and that's what we expect to continue to do. You can't just switch off a major part of our energy source and expect the economy to thrive. You have to do it in a thoughtful way over a long period of time, and I think that we're striking that right balance.
For years, certain members of Congress have been arguing the Interior Department should not purchase more land to expand parks, wildlife refuges, and other federal lands with critical wildlife habitat until the maintenance backlog in existing holdings is eliminated. I believe Senator Coburn had a report this week on that subject. What are your thoughts about the idea of the Interior not taking care of what it has already and therefore shouldn't purchase more? And would that, what would be put at risk if your department would not be able to acquire new properties?
So this is a common refrain that people toss around. Frequently I will say the same people that squeeze our budgets so we end up with a larger maintenance backlog. You can solve a maintenance backlog, yes. You solve a maintenance backlog by taking care of the maintenance backlog. It's not that complicated. And as a business person, that's what we did on a regular basis. That's what kept the economy going. So this is really, I just have to editorialize, it's very, very hard to run something on a month-to-month or year-to-year basis when you're talking about assets that last for a long time. So, well, in perpetuity, how about that for a long time? The circumstance that you described, Tommy, is, I'd say it's a common fallacy So I was out in the Tetons, as I mentioned. There is a large tract of land in the Tetons, in the middle of the Teton Valley, owned by the state, that if we aren't able to buy from the state, will get developed. And it is really critical habitat. One parcel right in the pronghorn elk migration. Another one right in the beautiful valley below the Tetons, which has no development at all, and it would all be mega mansions. These aren't areas that are going to cost the Park Service any more to maintain, but these are critical land holdings that the state wants to sell, the community wants us to find a way to buy, and the Park Service wants to buy. So, I mean, that's an illustration. There is money in the Land and Water Conservation Fund that goes to supporting easements. You've got a willing property owner that would like to support hunting access or fishing access or access for rock climbing across their property. They want to sell a conservation easement to do that, and money gets used for that as well. So to make the simplistic correlation that putting money into our lands necessarily causes more in maintenance is just incorrect. But I will say, I do hope that Congress steps up and provides us a more rational budget to take care of these special places that many of them have in fact set aside. I will also say that many of the members that are very critical out in the public, when I'm meeting with them in their offices, want a national park in their district.
Let me get very specific here for a second. 13% of all oil drilling and fracturing is done on BLM land right now. Will that number rise or go down in the future?
I'm going to talk about fracking for a second. Because I've fracked wells before. Probably not a lot of you out there. Hey, how many others have fracked a well in this room? Okay, I could say anything I wanted. Fracking has been an important tool in the toolbox for oil and gas for over 50 years. And some of the new techniques that are being used actually reduce the amount of footprint on the surface acreage in order to address and recover oil and gas from a much larger area. So this is an important tool, but it has to be done safely and responsibly. And the BLM is working on regulations that some of you are aware of that are going to do just that. We have a number of opportunities to continue to develop oil and gas on BLM lands, and we will continue to see that happen. So if you take an example I used earlier of the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, you want to make sure you minimize the surface impact for a whole variety of reasons. Species migration, sensitive ecosystem, permafrost, all of those kinds of things. By using directional drilling and fracking, they have an opportunity to have a softer footprint on the land, but that's a lot of acreage that the BLM has that will be developed. So short answer to your question is we'll likely do more because we'll be leasing more land to do it, but we're going to do it in a safe and responsible way.
The National Academy of Sciences released a review almost 150 days ago on the BLM's controversial wild horse program, saying, quote, continuation of business as usual practices will be expensive and unproductive for BLM and the public it serves, end quote. Does the Interior Department and BLM intend to embrace the reforms included in the report, and if so, when, or would they not?
Well, the question about how we effectively manage the wild horse and burro program is one that people feel very passionately about on both sides of the issue. It's difficult. There isn't a Secretary of Interior that I've talked to, and I've talked to them going back to the 1970s, that hasn't been aware of this issue and struggled with this issue. So I want to start by saying it's not easy. It's actually quite difficult. The National Academy of Sciences gave us a report. It was very helpful in a couple of ways. One is it validated what our land managers know, which is horses are really good at reproducing. 20% a year. That means the herd doubles in size every 3.5 years. That's a lot of horses, and providing they have forage, that gives them an opportunity to continue to grow very dramatically and not in a sustainable way, which the National Academy of Sciences also pointed out. Birth control is an alternative that the National Academy of Sciences report suggested, and we're certainly supportive of that. Challenge is, in the veterinary world of pharmaceuticals, you don't have the same controls or the same products as you do in the human world of pharmaceuticals. And We would love to have a stronger partnership with the pharmaceutical industry to come up with a more effective birth control method than what's available out there, because it's very expensive and it doesn't work for a very long period of time. And oh, by the way, you have to get the horses there to give them the birth control. I know there's some things you could do with stallions too, but I won't get into that. This is a big issue. It's an issue that's been around for decades. It's an issue that we care about, that we want to manage on a sustainable way. I'm not going to be able to fix it overnight. National Academy of Sciences gave us some good data. We have budget constraints. We have all kinds of alternatives that we're considering, and so we're working on it. We're going to continue to work on it, and I would love this to be a call to action to the pharmaceutical industry to help us develop an effective birth control method that we can use on horses that would, I think, help this problem get solved. Thanks.
The Colorado River is the lifeline to much of the Southwest, including my home state of Utah. Yet it is a finite resource and being tapped more and more. As the population of the Southwest continues to increase and warming temperatures decrease the mountain snowpack, what can Interior do to ensure the river doesn't get tapped out?
I like these little questions that you've got for me.
That's right.
So I'm going to watch Mike Connor and see how much he squirms as I answer, which because Mike is very, very knowledgeable on this topic. One of the this is an interesting job. Besides Secretary of the Interior, I have these other titles that the job entails, and one of them is the Water Master for the Lower Colorado River. Sounds pretty lofty. Mike and his colleagues in the Bureau of Reclamation introduced me to a really smart group of people from the states who are along the Colorado River. And really, it's states that manage the water rights. And Bureau of Reclamation has a pretty big job to do, like Hoover Dam, Glen Canyon Dam, other dams downstream, in managing the stream flows and working with the states and frankly, keeping this coalition together. They've also, at Reclamation, been working on something called Water Smart, which is just like being sensible about how we use energy and electricity, being really sensible at how we use water. We don't want to waste water. We want our canals, in some cases, if they can be covered, there's less evaporation. If we can prevent leaks, obviously that's water that's being wasted. There's things that we can do to make sure that every drop of water gets to its intended source. But there's also increasing demand. So working with states to identify better methods of using water more sustainably that also support ecosystem needs is exactly what this group of very smart people from all the states along the Colorado River have been working on in conjunction with my colleagues at the Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. Geological Survey, and others. So it's a big job, and it's all of our job to use water more wisely than we have in the past, because there's an awful lot that can be done just in how we use it, whether for agriculture or municipal uses or other uses. And this is something that this team of people working behind the scenes is working carefully to do, because you're right. Climate change is upon us. You see it in droughts throughout the West. We see it in the Colorado River. If you look at the levels in Lake Powell or Lake Mead or any of the other lakes that are in that region, you will see that we have a huge problem. And by the way, we share this river with Mexico, which is where Mike was just a few days ago. So these are important and not easy issues, but they're issues that are being addressed by some very, very smart people at both the state and the federal level, and local.
We're almost out of time, but before asking the last question, we have a couple of housekeeping matters to take care of. First of all, I'd like to remind you of our upcoming events and speakers. November 5th, next week, I believe that's Election Day, Goldie Hawn, the actress and founder of the Hawn Foundation, will be here at the National Press Club. November 7th, former Senator Judd Gregg, CEO of Securities, Industry, and Financial Markets Association, will be here. Gregg plans to unveil protections for investors to be endorsed by the banking group. November 11th, Walt Bettinger, President and CEO of the Charles Schwab Corporation, will be here. Secondly, I would like to present our guest with the traditional NPC mug. I'm sorry it didn't come from REI, but finally, for our last question, I think we wanted to ask the most pressing issue for those of us who live here in Washington: when will the Washington Monument reopen?
We hope to have it open a year from now. There are people who kind of like its exoskeleton. And, you know, I have a I have a wonderful job, but it's made more wonderful by some of the places I can go. There's been a few places where I said, "Could I do this?" And they say, "Ma'am, you can go any place you want." So one of those was I got to climb up the stairs to the scaffolding and then the ladder that went right up to the top of the monument and look down. So I kind of like that exoskeleton for a while, but does anybody have the exact date at the table here? Do you remember? Kate, you remember when we're going to reopen? No? Okay, so pretty sure it's a year from now. I did ask that question recently, and it just went in one ear and out the other, but it's not going to be long. Thanks.
We will invite you back to give us the exact date at a later point. How about a round of applause for our speaker today?